Do you have zig markers collecting dust? Well, it's time to get them out because today I'm going to be sharing some tips and tricks to help you create beautiful cards with those underused supplies you have in your stash. Let's get into it. This card is part of a celebration hop for creative worship stamps over on Instagram, and since creating videos is what I love most, I decided to share some tips for using zig markers here instead. Now, it's been a minute since I've used them and I forgot just how much fun they are to work with. I love connecting with you in the comments, so let's start a conversation. Do you love zig markers, dislike them, or maybe even forgot you had them? Maybe you have some tips for using them. Share your thoughts below, I'd love to hear from you. If you find value in this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, I'd love for you to subscribe and join me for more creative inspiration. The stamps I'm going to be using today are again from Creative Worship Stamps, and I will have them linked down below. The floral stamp is from My Savior's Love, and the sentiment stamp is Plant, Pray, Grow. For this card, you're going to need a really good paper because you're going to be coloring on it. So I'm going to be using the Strathmore Mixed Media paper. Bristol Smooth paper is great for zig markers as well. You can use watercolor paper as well if you stamp on the smooth side. Just make sure you're using a really good paper for coloring. We're going to start by taking a piece of Strathmore Mixed Media paper cut down to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I'm going to add some anti-static powder to it so that the embossing powder doesn't stick where I don't want it to. I'm going to ink up the floral stamp with some Versamark ink. Now, if you're new to card making, Versamark ink is a really sticky ink, and this is going to allow the embossing powder to stick to that design. Then I'm going to take some Ranger Superfine Detailed Gold embossing powder and put it all over that design. You're going to need to shake off the excess, and then with an embossing tool, you're going to melt that embossing powder. With that one floral stamp, I'm going to stamp it multiple times on that panel to mimic a background stamp. This is a great way to get more out of your supplies. I'm stamping a few extra florals to color and cut out. These will be layered behind the sentiment to add dimension and a beautiful finishing touch. When I use my zig markers, I like to combine 2 or 3 different techniques to add color to the petals. This creates natural variation, which I love because flowers often have soft, blended transitions between colors. And here's how I do it. So the first technique is water first and then color. I start by adding a little water to the petal with a water brush. Then I tap the zig marker into the damp area, allowing the color to naturally spread. Using the water brush, I blend the color outwards, pouncing the brush onto the paper rather than using strokes. Next, I add a darker color near the base of the petal or where the embossed lines are. Then I blend it out with the water brush. This helps create shadows near the center and lighter tones toward the edges. Technique 2. Dark color first and then blend. I apply the darkest zig marker directly to the paper without adding water first. Using the water brush, I blend the colors outward. After that, I apply a lighter color along the petal edges and use it to blend into the darker areas for a smooth transition. For more dimension, I sometimes stroke the water brush from the edge of the petal inward, which pushes the color towards the center and creates a soft gradient. Technique 3 is light color first and then blend. I start with the lightest color in the center or along the petal's edge and blend outward with the water brush. This method is great for softer, more delicate color transitions. Here are some additional tips. I mostly use a pouncing motion with my water brush instead of strokes. This helps create a textured look on the petals. Keep a paper towel or rag nearby to wipe off excess water from your brush to avoid pooling. Experiment with layering colors and blending techniques to see what works best for you. Now that I have all of the flowers colored, I am going to start adding some splatters with the same colors I used for coloring the petals. I add a little bit to my glass mat and pick it up with my water brush and then splatter. Once all the splatters are dry, I'm going to take some scissors and rough up the edges of that panel. This is going to give a more grungy feel to this more delicate looking card, and I feel it's just going to bring everything together. Off camera, I stamped and embossed my sentiment. I cut out some of those extra florals. I also cut down some vellum to use behind my sentiment and my card panel. I'm going to add some gold splatters to my card panel, to some vellum, to the sentiment piece, and also to the flowers. I'm going to be using foundry wax, and with foundry wax, you have to heat set it or else it's going to rub right off. I'm going to add some vellum to my card panel. The vellum measures 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I'm going to add a smaller piece of vellum to the center of my card panel. I'm going to layer my sentiment on top of that smaller piece of vellum. I'm going to layer those flowers that I cut out behind the sentiment. This just adds a little bit of dimension to the card. And of course, no card is complete without some white splatters, and I always use Dina Wakley Gloss Spray. Here's a look at both cards. The one on the left is the first one that I created, and obviously you saw me create the one on the right. Which one is your favorite? I would love to know. I can't really decide for myself. I really love the gold, but I also really love the white and like that orangey tone. So let me know which one's your favorite.